New York City, 1990. The midnight hour had long passed when the Miller family, John, Jenny, and their two daughters, 16-year-old Rossi and 10-year-old Emma, shuffled exhausted into their new lives. The apartment building was an aging mid-rise, its hallway cloaked in a perpetual, sickly green gloom, illuminated by a single buzzing light bulb near the staircase. It was 2:30 a.m., and the air already felt dead and heavy, even as the family hauled boxes into apartment 664. "I hate moving in the middle of the night. This building feels cold," Jenny muttered, holding a weak flashlight as John wrestled with a heavy cardboard cube. Their apartment sat in the middle of a strangely numbered triplet. To the left, 665 remained silently dark, its door rumored never to have been rented. To the right sat apartment 666. That was the source of the subtle, visceral wrongness. Rossi, draped in a band t-shirt, leaned against a wall of boxes, headphones insulating her from the chaos. Emma, small and neglected in the exhaustion of the move, slid quietly out the door. Drawn by the oppressive stillness of the corridor, she drifted toward the deepest shadow near the lobby elevator. There, in the absolute blackness of the unlit corner, a figure stood motionless, watching her. The woman was a block of shadow herself, large and shapeless, her face dissolving into the gloom. But her eyes were visible, burning with an unnatural, calculating malevolence that seemed to strip the heat from the air. They were not the eyes of a person, but of an old, hungry intelligence. Emma stopped, paralyzed by the intense, cold focus. "Come closer, little light," Isabella rasped, the sound a dry, unsettling scrape, like dead leaves dragged across pavement. Isabella lifted one hand, her fingers long and skeletal, beckoning. Emma's eyes locked onto the terrifying gaze, and without conscious thought, she began to shuffle forward, compelled toward the darkness. She was seconds from being swallowed by the shadow when a sudden, firm grip locked onto her arm. It was Rossi, finally alerted by the silence. "Emma, where were you going?" "Mom's asking for you." Rossi dragged her sister back toward the light of 664. Emma's head remained stubbornly turned toward the dark corner until she was pulled inside. Rossi glanced back once. The spot was empty, but the unsettling feeling of being watched clung to her like a shroud. The following weeks brought no peace, only a slow, creeping horror. The Miller family began to suffer from persistent low-grade ailments, debilitating headaches, exhaustion, and a clammy cold that settled strangely in Emma's room. The entire family was suffering because of the black magic being worked next door. John had met the neighbor in 666, Isabella's husband, Oliver. He was a ghost of a man, translucent skin stretched over bone, shuffling aimlessly. He was a victim, his life force slowly being leached away to feed his wife's dark agenda. "She keeps the heat down." "For the rituals," Oliver had whispered, his voice like tissue paper. "Needs the cold." For the transfer, Oliver was being used to fuel Isabella's insatiable desire for authority and control, her occult activities demanding a constant sacrifice. The only sound that ever breached the walls of 666 was a low, guttural chanting, sometimes accompanied by a brief, sharp crack, as if something small and hard had been dropped and then crushed underfoot. The true source of dread, however, was apartment 665, one night. While Rossi sat in the living room, she glanced at the dark peephole of the sealed door next door. A shadow, impossibly tall and misshapen, was momentarily pressed against the glass, an angular, supernatural being faintly glowing with a sickly, iridescent hue. When Rossi called the landlord, she received only a chilling response. "Apartment 665 is not on the roster." "It's sealed." "Has been for years." The being was trapped, but its influence was growing. It was the night before Halloween when the true purpose of the 666 corridor was revealed. In the center of Isabella's apartment, a dark circle glowed with unholy symbols. Kneeling within it, she wore a thick ceremonial cloak and a terrifying mask, a carved goat's head, its horns sweeping back, a dark nod to the hidden rituals she used to manipulate others for her own gain. Before her lay an altar draped in black velvet. On it sat a crude rag doll, fashioned to resemble John. Stuck into its chest, right over the painted heart, was a single rusty needle. Isabella raised her voice in a chant that sounded like grinding stone. "Mori animum tuum, nutri famulum meum." She was not trying to kill John outright, but to shrivel his will, to siphon his strength and feed it to the entity next door, the one that enforced her power in the world. Oliver's soul was almost entirely consumed. John was the necessary replacement. Isabella pressed a second, longer needle into the doll's head. Simultaneously, John screamed in apt 664, clutching his skull as if a spike had been driven through it. Isabella had sensed the pure, vibrant spirit of Emma first, but the teenager's protective fire, Rossi, was a disruptive force. Isabella resolved to save the strongest energy for the final sacrifice. Halloween night. The Miller family's forced attempt at a party was brittle. John lay semi-conscious on the sofa. Rossi, dressed reluctantly as a vampire, was wired with nervous energy. At 11:45 p.m., as the town clock approached midnight, a loud, horrendous scraping erupted from 666, a sound like metal claws on stone. Then the corridor light died. "I'll do it," Rossi insisted, grabbing a flashlight. She stepped into the darkness. The atmosphere was instantly suffocatingly cold. The door to 666 was slightly ajar. Rossi peered through the crack. Inside, the scene was catastrophic. The altar was aflame with dark fire. The glow on the floor revealed Oliver was gone, replaced by a searing column of silver light that was Oliver's final essence. Hunching over Isabella, the supernatural being, skeletal, massive, and angular, was actively draining the column, becoming terrifyingly solid. The entity was ready. Isabella, still wearing the goat mask, let out a victorious, insane laugh, lifting the needle-bristling doll of John. "Now the true harvest! The girl's vitality next!" The monstrous creature turned its vacant, light-absorbing gaze directly toward the crack. It had seen Rossi. A massive, invisible force slammed the door open, hurling Rossi against the wall of 665. The creature stepped out, a grotesque, distorted mockery of a man, its presence crushing the air. Isabella followed, reaching for Rossi with hands that seemed desperate for the kill. "The one, you are the strongest. You will serve my servant well." Isabella shrieked, snatching the cursed doll and raising the final needle. But fate, or Oliver's last, desperate act, intervened. In her madness, Isabella stumbled, knocking the burning censer onto the altar. The flames consumed the black velvet and the flammable ritual materials instantly. A massive, dying flare of light shot from Oliver's disintegrating life column toward his tormentor. Isabella shrieked as the fire and overloaded energy consumed her. She stumbled back into the inferno, clutching the cursed doll until the door of 666 slammed shut, containing the blaze. The supernatural being paused. Its fuel source was spent, its mistress was burning. With a sigh like wind escaping a tomb, the creature's solid form began to ripple and fade, melting back into the shadows of apartment 665. The fire department contained the damage. Isabella's remains were found fused to the charred rag doll. Oliver was officially listed as incinerated. John and Emma recovered almost instantly. The mysterious ailments, the constant headaches, and the crippling exhaustion vanished the moment Isabella died. But the darkness had merely adapted. Weeks later, the family was back in 664. Rossi, lying in bed, stared at the wall. The cold had lifted, but the silence was shattered by a new sound, the rhythmic, soft tapping of a finger against the wall of her room. The wall that connected her directly to the sealed, empty space of apartment 665. She froze, clutching her duvet. The tapping stopped. Then, from the darkness of her corner closet, the cold, faint, rasping sound she had first heard in the lobby echoed. "You are the strongest little light," the voice whispered, like dry leaves scraping pavement. "You will serve my servant well." Rossi slowly turned her head. Isabella was dead, her occult activities destroyed. But the entity she fed, the ancient supernatural force that needed a soul to sustain its black magic and its control over this world, was still there, trapped in the darkness of 665. And now, it was focused solely on the strong, protective energy of Rossi. The ritual was far from finished. Rossi was now the harvest. If you liked the video, share it and subscribe to this channel for more.